Uh, when my family in co-op with whoever and everybody had um, these special sacrifices, um, I uh, within a fairly short time frame thereafter kind of fled. Um, I fled the state with my kid. It was kind of a big deal. Someone set a flag up out in the yard. It was at half mast and it was upside down. It was an American distress signal basically out in the yard, and they didn't just hang it like that for me to see. They literally walked me out to the flag and began to talk about it and to act like they didn't know who set the flag like that. Um, I don't know who would do such a thing like that, and to like kind of make light of it or joke about it, or but most especially just to draw a lot of attention to it. And one of them stood up on the pole and kicked the ground over and over again, and he said, I need you to remember this turtle. He was like, look, I tried to make this shaped like a turtle. He was like, I know I didn't do a very good job, but it's shaped like a turtle, isn't it? Um, and he was like, hey, look, if you don't remember anything else, could you just at least remember this turtle right here? And yeah, in the base of this flagpole was what he was calling a turtle, which was an unusual looking mound. And um, you know, this, as I said, the flag was half at half mast and was also upside down. And I won't tell you the ideas and visions and what flashed through my head at the time. And I won't go through all that with you like here now. And like, I will say that it was pretty freaky and that I just tried to just keep my composure and to just kind of like act like I was unfazed by it all. Like, just be like, oh, okay, yeah, doty doty do. I'm not sure if I did a very good job of that. I think you might have been able to tell that I was paying attention and that my wheels were turning, and that I was trying to, you know, actually, um, you know, uh, I was also worried about there being something genuinely wrong, and um, that people were trying to get help beforehand, which was really bothersome. Um, Hang on a second. I'm just sitting here. I'm like, am I telling the right story? Like, am I doing this right? Okay, so sorry about that. Sorry, it's a really upsetting story. All right, and so for people to ever say that I'm a dissenter or whatever, or that I am, anti-American or a rebel or whatever, like, I don't agree with that. I, but because of everything that's happened and because I could not get any help for it, I definitely have, and because hate crimes have been committed against me by what seems to be law enforcement, uh, and military agents, and potentially even, weird people that work with weird research stuff. Um, after, and my baby being taken away, and that's really been the main thing, is that you guys took my kid, and you came up with really retarded reasons and ways to go about doing that, both times. And they both times used corrupt law enforcement to go about doing that. 3 different times they tried, but 2 different, like they tried a million times, but so yeah, the bad guys had a distress flag in the yard, and um, those bad guys were the scariest kind of all the bad guys. Um, that was in particular a place where I partied when I was, a kid, whenever I was still a teenager. Um, and I did notice some things back then, um, but I was very young, 18 and 19 years old, and I knew that I didn't know, you know what I mean? That I didn't understand fully what was going on around me, and I had already begun to make connections between people who pretended that they weren't connected. So I learned pretty easily that I couldn't actually speak up about things, and whenever I did, so my efforts to speak up about what was happening began whenever I was a kid, and that would be hushed basically by a preacher offering me money to be quiet, and my parents trying to urge me to accept that money, which I did not accept. And I was actually really offended as a little kid that people would offer me money to be quiet about such things. Like, because that guy especially really bothered me. Like, that really hurt me pretty bad. And I was like only like 9 years old or whatever. That guy still hasn't gotten in trouble for that. He does live in Amarillo, Texas. He's got his own double wide or whatever out there, single wide or whatever. He lives right next to his parents. He is on the offender registry there, and he is on there for hurting like a 6-year-old and another girl that was about my age, I guess, uh, who would have been, I'm assuming, affiliated with the church that we all attended, because that was where a lot of the abuse was taking place whenever I was a kid, was in the churches, and especially in the nursery. The nursery ends up being the most dangerous and sinister, and just most terrible place in the entire church, depending on who's running it, for real. There were times that I was locked into the closet in my church from Sunday till Sunday, and they had different ritualistic ceremonies with us. I'll just go into it just for a second because this part is like super weird. You know how on churches sometimes there are these glass crosses in the walls. Um, well, a certain time of year, uh, now this isn't all of those churches, of course, but some of these churches are actually set up so that a certain time of year, um, the light blasts through. The light, I was about to say the light blasts through the that window, and it might be during the equinox or the solstice or whatever. But in a certain circumstance, I believe that I remember children being made to walk in a circle, and it was really, really cold. And trying not to go into detail about very much more than that, just that they would be made to walk in a circle in front of that light as it blasted through the window during the solstice or the equinox or whatever, and that would line up with their witchcrafty rituals, ritualistic abuses, and things of that nature. I haven't actually made it to those any videos about that kind of abuse. That's like child called it abuse type abuse. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've ever read that book or not, but it's a pretty incredible book about child abuse. You definitely should read it if you never have. I believe, without looking it up, just right off the top of my head, that the author's name is Dave Peltzer, but I'm not sure. I should probably look that up while I. Anyways, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Sorry. I don't think that I am. Pretty sure that that's it. And I haven't thought of that book in a million years, so that's really weird that it would just roll off. You know what I mean? That would just. But wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. So this whole speaking thing and YouTube or just video format or video form is kind of like really scary to me, and I've been trying not to do it this whole time, but like I apparently I have to. So yeah, they set me up to see the flag thing going on, and I then I did not react as quickly as I probably should. I knew that I couldn't go to the local police because I knew that they were in on anything that would happen around there. And I'm just going to I guess, come right out and tell you who that is. Those are the police in Buchanan, West Virginia. So I hope that corruption issue, that there's a resolution found for that. It's kind of a problem. Now, the town has begun to look better. I will say that it's a really quaint little town. And I'm not going to say that the officers therein are necessarily violent or aggressive, but, and I do feel a difference in the tone of things. I'm not saying that every one of them is, but I also don't know that every one of them isn't. So I can't really attest for that. I can just tell you that there's definitely a problem. And Buchanan is what I would call an experimental zone. There's a lot of experimental zones, which I kind of consider the whole thing an experimental zone. But according to Kuan Yin, there are different zones specially selected for more experimenting, and more control than others, and more corruption than other places. So, I planned on ultimately, I took that file with the distress flag, and I basically, it was almost like taking something and putting it in my backpack, you know, and it was like, I'm going to do something about this, but I'm going to pretend that I'm not right until the moment that I do. And within a 2 to 3 week time frame, I drove roughly 400 miles. I'm not entirely sure about that now. I mean, I think I would have to actually look back. I drove from West Virginia to New York, uh, which I hit New York the first time in an Amish town that is also an HA town. And so that was kind of a weird thing that they like have their own Amish towns. And it was also excellent to see that basically the border of New York is heavily watched, and that those who actually enforce territorial boundaries and like people who actually pay attention, like that actually happens on the border of New York. Like New York is actually one of those G states where people are actually paying attention to like what's going on, even if they act like they're not. And when I first crossed over into New York, was it whenever I first did or whenever I did it the second time? Anyways, I just smelled marijuana. It was just the most beautiful cannabis smell. It was just as I crossed the state line of New York, this blam, it hit me, this weed smell. It was just so amazing. I was like, oh, I just heard angels singing, and you know, it was so incredible. And I was like, what? I was like, I didn't know weed was legal in New York. I was like, no wonder, no wonder the good Lord sent me here. Now, if I actually tell you the more traumatic story that ties into this, which is pretty severe, it's basically the most severe story that I know that I could possibly tell. And that's part of the reason why I'm afraid to do it. And I also want to be very, very respectful of that situation in particular because of how gruesome and severe and awful that it was. And the fact that I don't want to, I would never want to push anyone or not push anyone, but uh, I just don't want to perpetuate that shit. Like, I don't want to feed into it. I don't want to exacerbate it. I don't want to add insult to injury, and I also don't want to disrespect the dead. Because in this situation in particular, I have a very personal connection to the person who passed away after I would see that flag. And I don't actually know who that person was or who those people were, but I feel a very close connection to them anyways. And I mean, heck, it might be something I could do a tarot reading about, I guess, with everybody. I thought about doing I thought about starting to do tarot readings for you guys. I just don't want to lose people who are afraid of tarot or people who are against it, because I can understand people being against it too, and I don't want to offend anybody's religious practices or beliefs or anything like that. So I haven't really gone there. I mean, I even thought about doing a Charlie Kirk reading. I thought about doing tarot readings about all of the people involved in all of my stuff, and then some. But I thought, well, I better not, because I don't want to disrespect anybody, you know. But I did actually feel a very strong prompt to do a Charlie Kirk tarot reading, almost like Charlie was sitting with me and was like, "Hey, I want you to do a reading for me and stuff," which that was pretty bizarre. But again, I could understand where that would upset somebody just for me to say something like that. So I'm not trying to upset anybody, but it's like, how can you just go without upsetting anybody? You just, I mean, I'm not sure if I can really, I'm not sure how well I can just tiptoe around and walk on eggshells and ice for everybody to, so that I can, make sure that I don't feel that it would be disrespectful if the man himself was asking me from the other side to please do a reading for him for everybody. I don't feel that it would be disrespectful to honor the man's wishes, but other people might think that it's like the most disrespectful thing that they've ever seen. It just depends on what you know. And something like that isn't for everybody, and the stuff that I'm talking about is not for everybody. Um, I, I'm, but I'm also not trying to limit necessarily who sees it. I just definitely don't want kids to see anything that I've done here, any of this necessarily. But I don't want to make it like a rated R channel. I know I've seen stuff and heard stuff that was way more serious than this. Um, on and what we've got to talk about today in 2025 and what these YouTubers are talking about, especially when it comes to the the same genre of crazy stuff that I talk about. I mean, they get pretty deep into their explanations of tortures and deaths and things of that nature. Especially, I've heard everyone use every language, every type of language under the sun and the moon. So I don't anticipate, hopefully, that I would be, um, punished or reprimanded for any of that, especially under the circumstances. But bullies are bullies. I have had trouble being online basically since last night. I was kicked off of the house internet here. So that was super lame. And I tried to get back on, and that didn't work out, of course, all of a sudden. And then at the same time that I was kicked off of the house internet, I was kicked off of the restaurant's internet. And I lost phone service within the last 3 days. So now I have to come up with my $50 for phone service again. And then I have another phone, and I have to figure out how to get it activated, because for some reason I can't get it activated or whatever, which I would really like to use that phone. But I have to figure out how to do that. Hopefully I can figure that out this weekend. I did order a card, which I'm not asking for money from any YouTube anything. I mean, I might someday if I get super desperate, which I guess I'm always desperate, but I'm just not trying to go there, because I know that what I'm talking about is so serious. Like, the different things that I mention are so serious that I don't want people to think that I'm out here just saying the shit for money or whatever. But yeah, and I don't know who knows this and who doesn't, but I'll just let the cat out of the bag, I guess, that I drove over 400 miles to I drove to this to a sorry one of the Native American reservations in the state of New York, where I sought non-whites to give statements to with regard to the death of Karina Silva, and I and about that distress flag, because I knew that Karina Silva, whether she was an informant who was paid to come in and try to hurt me or whatever she was trying to do, that was still as far as I was concerned, that was still a federal agent, or it was at least someone who was honorable enough to have worked at or with the Pentagon somehow. And when she died, I felt that it was under um, uh, suspicious circumstances, and that I had seen so much of her, I felt, in everything that was happening, and some of the events that unraveled in the time frame that they did. It happened very quickly after I realized that Karina had been MDK'd, and that the people, even the person in the room with me, had something to do with that, because everybody started acting really weird and shady as soon as I was talking on Messenger about it with these dweebuses. And also, it seemed that a gal named Connie was unaccounted for, and they could not also produce her or put her on the phone or have her even say so much as a voice message or send me a picture of her. They would not invite me over so that I could see her. And that was a gal who used to come over to my house and smoke a lot of pot. An older lady. That was Garrett's mother. And somehow or another, after the passing of or within the same time frame that apparently Karina has passed away, then they say that now Connie was not in the home with her husband any longer. Now he's supposed to be out in the country either by himself or with somebody else, and now Connie was supposed to be with Robert, and now Robert is Karina's ex-boyfriend, who she was with quite a bit. That was who she was always with whenever they were around me, was Robert. I accidentally got Robert arrested one time. That sucked really bad. And Garrett. So Garrett was was the newest boyfriend of Karina before she died. So she was with Robert for the most part and I knew her for years, I think. For the time frame that I knew her, she was with Robert, and then which I did date a guy named Will, and he would have known them. There were lots of different people who knew Karina and Robert. Karina worked at the Fast Break Food Mart there in Beverly. So everybody knew Karina and everyone knew Robert. There are people working there, and there are people still in that area. All the people that have ever worked at the store within the last, I'd say 5 years, pretty much all of those people knew who Karina was. I already made a video about her. She, I believe, was targeted by Officer Boatwright and certain other people because she was a witness that could have testified against Officer Boatwright, basically. And I'm sure that there was more to than that. Ultimately, there was way more than that going on because Karina and Garrett were sort of hooked up, and then Corey was around, and Tori, a chick named Tori, was around. That was who Eugene was banging. Everybody was doing a bunch of different shit, and I was thought that Karina was a undercover or an informant of some kind, and she originally was very straight-laced and didn't do anything, always told us that she was on probation or parole or something like that. And now I'm not sure if she was really an agent still. You know what I mean? I can't be certain about that. But under the circumstances, she very well may have been. And even if it was intended to be for my detriment at the time, I still felt that for her to be, for her time to be cut short like that was certainly messed up. And I felt that it was another situation where just the guys, that just the women aren't really valued, that they're not really worth anything to the guys. Karina was somebody who had a couple vehicles. You know, she had a nice black car, she had a nice blue car, she had a place, she had some stuff, she had money in her bank account, things like that. And you know, I've heard stories of people getting hurt and being MDK'd over as little as $10 out in Grafton, West Virginia back in the day. So, I mean, and I know that that's like a really, you know, out in the middle of nowhere town. The same thing happens in, you know, the hard cities and stuff all over the place. People get shot over $5. People get, you know, so to think that somebody would be 86'd over, you know, a couple of cars and a little bit of shit in their house and then what's left in their bank account, I don't think that that's too far fetched. But also, people could have, the people who actually cared might have also figured out that she was an informant. But also, I think that I realized that in the grand scheme of things, people don't actually care about that as much as you'd think that they do, because the majority of these gangs and groups, cults, organizations, and everything, they're actually run by federal agents on the down low. Like, there's a couple few gangs, people don't know about it. Even the the most famous gangs that you guys know of, they are the number one person at the top is like a CIA or an NSA agent or one of those other agents that you don't know the name of. Really skilled bad guys sometimes, or even really skilled good guys sometimes run things like that. But these days, mostly just bad guys running things, and mostly just running, you know, the most terrible scheme of all, which is, you know, selling the bodies and souls of men, women, and children. You know, let's just be real. I couldn't just go report a flag that my friends were joking about in their own yard. Something terrible actually happened afterwards that I did report, and I wasn't the reportant type. Just to let you guys know, the person who people knew before they basically ran me out of my city, the city that I lived in, where I fucking had an apartment and, you know what I mean, worked and I went to church and all that. That person was definitely willing to and needed to work with and needed help with from law enforcement, things like that, over a number of different things that were happening. That person was trying to just get by without interacting with law enforcement in any way. And I knew already that I might be the subject of some weird shit, some kind of weird, that there was maybe some weird government shit going on, because this stepdad person showed up in my life. And then throughout a little bit of time, people were saying that he was a fucking CIA agent and shit. And there was some weird stuff that went on with that, like him asking me for the cure for AIDS, and me being taught how to use tarot cards and magic and things like that whenever I was really pretty young, you know what I mean, 11 years old. And now all of a sudden there's a CIA guy in my life, and I'm being sent to this witch who's teaching me, you know what I mean, all of this crazy magic and stuff like that. She even does a death spell on me, you know. And, you know, if it weren't for, you know, it was a spell, it was a thing that she did that would have, that all by all means could have, you know, MDK'd and 86 me right then. But we both saw a supernatural event take place, which was her ability to you know, put the MDK in the works, and then for me to survive it. It was all a very weird thing that happened. We both definitely saw it happen. It definitely changed the relationship between us, from student and teacher, and turned it then into, a homicide attempt that it was difficult to not say anything about. And, we kind of began to, separate vibe wise. And we definitely, I ended up, getting dropped off, and, life went on for two different paths for us. And then she ended up actually becoming a crackhead. That was Terry Mackey. Like, after she failed, I guess, like, she taught me a lot, which she was very dark. I really wish that they had found somebody that wasn't so dark, but she was good though. I mean, not good. She was, at the time, she leaned more towards bad. She was sort of neutral, but not. She was more, she wasn't really that great of a person, basically. Um, and then I would end up sort of becoming friends with her son for a second, but he, like, it was just almost like a curse that went down the line. And I think that she was targeted extra after me, so that she definitely wouldn't say anything or be credible, if she ever tried to mention anything about it. They just kind of went after her and turned her into the biggest crackhead ever. Uh, and I tried to talk to her after that, or like, even though she did that, like, I did try to find her and talk to her, but she would, like, hide with this little boyfriend that she had. I don't know if she's still with him or not. His name's Justin. And, like, she would be, like, hiding at his house, at his parents' house and stuff like that, all with him hooked up. But then, like, you would see him in town with these, like, younger chicks running around in his truck and stuff like that. And you could tell that Terry had just lost it. And over the course of time, she just basically, like, started smoking a lot of crack. She was with this guy named Joe back then, and Joe tried to, like, mess with me whenever I was like 13 years old. And that was another thing, is, like, she sent me on a ride with her boyfriend Joe at the time, and then Joe was, like, trying to put the moves on me and stuff, and I was like, that was a kind of an uncomfortable situation. Now, if Terry at the time, like whenever I was a young kid or whatever, if she would have, stuck some melons in my face or something like that, I can't really tell you how I would have reacted. I might not have rejected that, but I definitely didn't want any of nasty old Joe. But yeah, that was whenever I was kind of like introduced to witchcraft and magic and all this other stuff. Um, and well, it wasn't when I was first introduced to magic, um, because magic, I think of magic as being different than witchcraft, and um, certain kinds of magic I was uh, involved in whenever I was a toddler. Um, well, I didn't really call it magic. I call it um, divining, but there is like a little bit of magic that happens with it sometimes, but it's not witchcraft. It's different. It's almost like if the good guy X-Men had a spiritual form of witchcraft that was still acceptable, but it's not witchcraft though. It's like it's still like ritualism almost, or whatever. It's kind of difficult to explain. Um like, it doesn't have to be ritualistic. The people who work with the light, we don't need the same silly, like, principles and limitations, and we don't necessarily need to make things rituals and things like that. We can alchemize and transmute and transform and translate and all these other things, without using the same um, step-by-step methods that other people have to use in order to um, reach the same, I don't know, goal. So yeah, I went up there to speak up for myself and to speak up for people who passed away, and what seemed like it could be like a whole lot of people who passed away, um, including Karina Silva, and this weird flag in the yard that somebody was able to put up, and I honestly felt like, um, I knew that by leaving and fleeing the scene after everything that had happened within that like week time frame or whatever, that so many people were going to follow me, and they did, and I was followed to New York, where all manner of people hovered around me. They even had the people who live on the reservation, like trying to get me to leave, trying to intimidate me, doing all kinds of stuff, revving their engines, like doing everything that they could, that these people could, to try to get me out of their reservations. I would sleep in the van in different places. One time it was down by this rivery kind of area, and I woke up to like a game warden type animal control or wildlife uh, kind of agent dude, and he was so fine, you guys. He was like so hot, and I even saw him later on. I even saw him at the gas station. He was pumping gas, and there are like a few different dudes on those reservations in New York that were like so fine. But like, I didn't go there. I didn't go there with them because like I didn't go there for that. Like, I mean, like a couple of them tried, and I had to be like, I mean, I think that I'm not gonna go there with that. People did maybe do something terrible in Niagara Falls to me while I was there, but I'm not gonna hit that story yet. So yeah, like it didn't really make that much of a difference ultimately to find people who weren't white to try to make the complaint to. I mean, like the original complaint, yeah, like I maybe did have to leave West Virginia, and I had to leave, like, not only did I have to leave West Virginia because of the corruption in West Virginia, but I also had to leave its bordering states. And I also basically, by leaving West Virginia and by going to another state and into a whole different territory and a whole different nation, technically, to tell their people, or to fucking tell somebody that's at least connected with somebody who wasn't us. You know what I mean? Like something. I was willing to go to Canada and tell them. I was willing to go anywhere and tell them, but I just felt led for some reason to this place, and so that's anyways where I went. And because dude, I didn't know what to do. Legit, like I was like thinking that people were trying to do the same thing to me, that they'd set me up, hearing happening to these other girls, and I was like, man, if I don't speak up about this, that could have been, that was somebody's daughter up there, you know what I mean? And it's bad. It was really bad. And yeah, I'm not necessarily going to get into that part, like I said, but and because the guy was kicking the ground saying something about a turtle, you know, I I think, I don't know, something happened with the turtles. I'm just gonna say that much. It might not have been much, but I actually did drive over 400 miles away, um, and when I left, lots of really wicked, dangerous people followed me who had already hurt a lot of people in really deviant and terrible ways, um, and they were terrified that I was running away, but also at the same time, they were running me away. Um, So you had some group of people who was terrified that I was running, and then another group of people who that was the point, because this would be the beginning of what they called the Hunger Games. So I showed up, and or as I was leaving, I knew that my life, because I was leaving to make a report, that it would change me from being in like that cool zone that I rightfully was in, as someone who was almost fringe outlawy. I kind of like a lifelong slavish trafficking victim person ish, but on the same hand, I mean, I had a little slight bit of freedom, but not really. Like, I could only do what they wanted me to do. I couldn't just go and get a job wherever I wanted, or do whatever I wanted, or make money however I wanted. Yeah, they were not going to allow that. And whenever I made a certain amount of money, they would begin to take the money. And yeah, they would begin to take the money out of my bank accounts. They would begin to literally creep up, open up my safes, and take money and more out of my safes. They would take, while I was just chilling around the house, around my aunt's house, they would send the kids in to go through my stuff and take, whatever they could find. And they'll use the kids so that that way, if they get caught, the parents can just act like it was the kids doing it and that they didn't send the kids in. And that became a tactic that I saw people using nationwide, like having their kids go in and steal from people and being like, oh, those kids, when they're the ones, of course, sending the kids in to do that shit, of course. Super fucking not okay for anybody to teach their kids to steal. That's fucking so stupid and shitty. Super not okay to teach your kids to fucking deal drugs either. That's what my mom did with me. You know what I mean? But and it's super not okay. It's definitely never going to be okay for anybody to exploit their children or to teach them prostitution, or any caretaker or guardian, anything like that. Like any criminal affiliated anything, like no one needs to be teaching anyone any crime anything. And it's definitely something that is taught by caretakers to the very kids that they are bringing up, which is one of the main reasons why I've been yelling and kicking and screaming so much about not wanting my kid to go with these people who are literally the most evil people on the planet. The people who are responsible for the things that have happened to me are the most evil, sinister, wicked people on the planet, and they belong to be in prison for the rest of their lives. Some of them deserve the outright death penalty and deserve to be executed in front of everyone. And people, yes, can really be that bad. People can really be that bad that they need just 86 right there. Just say your piece, eat your, your gallon of mint chocolate chip ice cream, peace out. It's been real, dude. When I got to, whenever I was after or around the time that I actually gave some statements to a state trooper in New York about what was happening in West Virginia, because things were so bad that I couldn't tell anyone in West Virginia or the surrounding states. And, New York wasn't necessarily any less corrupt. New York came with its own different enormous amount of corruption. They just did a little bit differently, and they were the only actual preserving and self-protecting, self-maintaining areas anywhere around Appalachia, anywhere in the Allegheny or Appalachian mountain ranges at all. They're literally the only state that is protective of itself and its own, and watches its own borders and boundaries the way that it does. And that there are reservations that are set up with a different set of signaling and a different set of a way that law enforcement is run, and is also a self-protective and preserving system. It's actually pretty incredible. It's really incredible on the down low. I really wish that I could tell people more about it, but I would be giving away their secrets, and I would never want to do that, because I really want for that state and those reservations to be strong and to be protected and maintained, even though they might be a little bit too protected. I only mean that in the way that some of their people are a little bit too isolated, and I do feel and see very clearly how the women are trapped basically in a lot of these reservation type situations, and that the men in and outside of these reservations have learned how to use and manipulate the reservation, protective reservation, whatever, against the actual women who live on these reservations. And it's a real crying shame. And I've heard a lot of them feel so trapped on some of these reservations that they run away and have to keep themselves hidden to not be found and pushed back into the reservation, where they're just going to be trapped there like that. And I've heard that that is more so relating to the reservations in the Rosebud, and the Rosebud Reservation, and the one next to it. But I don't want to say that it wouldn't also apply to other reservations, because I wouldn't be doing those gals justice if the same thing is happening there. And it wouldn't just be the reservations. It could also be, the same principle I've heard can kind of go on as far as with the Amish communities. There might be some weird stuff going on with the Amish, because they're so isolated in that there's no one for those women or children to speak up to. There's no way, you know what I mean? There's no way that you can make a phone call, no way that you can get a ride to, you know what I mean? Nobody's going to come out and ask you if you need to make special reports. So, these communities just go without any law intervening. And, and it's not just those communities, but there are Black communities, white communities, all different ethnicities and cultures who that those women are being, very specially kept and isolated and, held, that's all really the only thing that I really mean by too protected, or that, bystanders or, other people aren't so easily, or, there, that it's not, certain places aren't so easy for them to gain access to, rendering the community there basically trapped in whatever situation that happens, without any interference from the outside or eyes from the outside carrying information in or out, or being able to even carry people in and out. And then to complicate situations, you may have entire groups of people who have infiltrated that reservation, or, that Amish community on the down low, or the whatever community. And they are there to actually create and maintain a cycle of trafficking and of abuse and exploitation of those people without anyone's, without anyone being able to prevent that or block that. And, weird, strange, secret things happen like that in all different households and communities, and, everywhere. But I had my little boy with me in the van, and this was while I was in New York, and we'd been sleeping in the parking lot of a truck stop because I was terrified to go anywhere else, like at the time. Like, it was really bad. I felt like I had to have surveillance on me and all of these extra eyes on me the whole time. Otherwise, I felt like my child and I were just going to be picked off, and just heinous things were going to be done to us. And I was just so terrified, you guys. I was more scared than I've ever been in my whole life. And I got down to where I only had $4 on my Wisely card. It was a Wisely card at the time that I'd gotten from working at Pizza Hut. And I only had $4 left. I'd worked there for about a year and a half, maybe longer, and I'd always had money on that card. And I all of a sudden had $4 left on that card. And I desperately needed to put that $4 in my gas tank. And that last $4 was just magically removed from that card. It sucked really, really bad. And so I was then stranded in New York with my kid, and the last $4 that I had, which would not have gotten me very far at all, was taken off my card. And it was so terrible. I even called them and was like, why? Where did this money go? Why? And that was one of the times that I talked to somebody who just, you know what I mean? I definitely, when weird things like this would happen, they would have me talk to somebody who would just give me the runaround. And like, they would almost be laughing about what happened. They did that with when I tried to get a hotel through booking.com. They got on and canceled my reservation, and I lost money. I lost hundreds of dollars for months. It took me months for them to give it back. So there would just be dumb things like this that would happen with all of my bank accounts. Everything. There would be money that would come up in person and from the bank. Even my boss that I stayed with in Taos, Sandy, Nasty Sandy, even she stole money from me. Like, I would like have I had $40 sitting on a shelf. She came over and took 20. Like, super weird. But that last $4 that I had while my kid and I were in that minivan after being run out of the state of West Virginia with human sacrifices, and you know what I mean, me carrying this information about this upside down flag, and this federal agent, or potentially undercover agent, who I felt like had been murdered, and potentially by a really corrupt cop, and these two ex-boyfriends who were involved in this big giant web of these traffickers. You know what I mean? It was information that I really needed to give somebody, and I had way more information than that. There's way more to it than that. There's even, there were people in different areas who I ended up going to within that time frame who all let the cat out of the bag. They were all connected to each other and in the same gangs, groups, cults, covens, organizations, all that. Yeah, and there was no safe place for me anymore. There was no safe place. There were no safe people for me anywhere. Even like this old man who I'd done a lot of gardening work for, and I'd spent years with my kids. They played out in the creek and dug up fossils, and we did a lot of work in the garden, and spent a lot of years out there. And he, or the people in the house the very last night that my kid and I spent there, whichever stalker weirdo, I don't know if it was Tim or who it was, but they were allowed to be in the very same room with my kid and I, as they made little scratchy sounds and little clicky sounds and did little weird dumb shit all fucking night long. And it was absolutely fucking terrifying, especially after being made witness of fucking human sacrifices. And my little boy and I were just fucking terrified. And my little boy was like, what is that, Mom? And I was just like, don't worry about it, son. Just go to sleep. I was like, they're just going to make noises and stuff. But hopefully they won't hurt us. I was like, I don't really know what else to do. And, the old man I've been working for years and I've known for years is listening to me talk to my kid in the next room and knows that I know that he's let these fucking dumbasses come in and hide in the fucking closet and under the bed and make all kinds of noises and be fucking crackheads and meth heads and fucking retards and shit. And the fucking retard's car is fucking parked out in front of his van. And like, I end up being there for like a few hours longer than he wants me to be there. And he has to yell at me to get me to leave. And he starts fucking yelling at everybody else, get that fucking van out of my driveway and shit like that. And you know what I mean? Like, he can hardly even keep it together and fucking hide what the fuck has been going on the entire time. And that's the last time I went there. And that dude won't even fucking talk to me now. And I understand it's cool. I understand that it sucks to be, the bad guy in the situation and be one of the people who are part of the MDK campaign or whatever. It's been difficult for me because every single person basically that I've ever known my entire life is part of that. And it's a very grievous affair that I can't speak to any of them. I can't, it's stupid for me to even have come back to any of these towns to try to see, anybody who I'm related to, because they've all been pulled into the shit and they're all, you know what I mean? And that's the only way that they have been able to, you know what I mean? Because I left, they pushed certain members of my family and kids and shit into their same little fucking cult that, was the same fucking cult shit that made it to where they had to raise the distress flag in the fucking first place, and that I had to drive 400 miles away to tell other officers in a completely other state what the fuck was going on in West Virginia, because it was such a fucking heinous atrocity, you know what I mean, that there was, you wouldn't have been a real fucking human being to not fucking speak up about it, but as soon as I made the decision to get in the car and actually leave West Virginia and drive up to New York to try to find somebody to talk to about it, I lost any level of outlaw coolness that I would ever have. I had to let any of that go. You know what I mean? I had to let go of, here I am, like, these are different cults, gangs, groups, organizations who I am potentially going to be stepping forward to speak up about, you know what I mean, because of just how severe I've seen you guys let the state of affairs become. If a single mom is having to grab her kid and run for her life from your fucking human sacrifices and shit like that, you guys have a fucking distress flag out in the yard. Yeah, maybe it's time to fucking speak up, dude. Maybe somebody should already fucking spoken up. And I couldn't just go and speak up. I felt like I couldn't go and speak up about a flag that I didn't know anything about. And there was no way I was going to fucking send the cops back into that fucking place. There was no fucking way. The person that I was before they did all this, there was no fucking way I was going to call a cop or send a fucking cop anywhere, especially after what the cops did back around 2020, whenever I took them a fucking severed finger and they put me in fucking jail. They fucking took my fucking car. They took my kids. They got me kicked out of my fucking apartment building, my home. They stole my driver's license and they stole the $80 that my grandma had just sent me through Walmart. Like, I knew that whenever I actually left West Virginia to go speak up about your fucking flag in the yard, that fucking pedophiles and murderers and rapists and fucking pieces of shit were gonna fucking follow me all the way to fucking New York. And they were gonna watch me while I stood there and tried to give information and make a report to other cops who had already been told that I was there, and they already knew. Then they were already told not to take my fucking report seriously and not to give a fucking shit about anything I was gonna say. They were practically terrified to fucking talk to me because of whatever the fuck it was that they'd been fucking told. It was absolutely fucking horrible. Like, I didn't want to talk to them. I tried the whole time I was there, like, to just chill and try to think of some other way around talking to cops about anything. Like, and as I was sleeping in the van, I had a dream that the people who were responsible for slaying that girl back there, that they were all with me in New York, and that we were all standing beside the water there, and I had not yet seen the water in New York of Lake Erie or Ontario or anything like that. And in the dream, we were all standing around, and they were really mad at me for going as far out of the way as I did, and like actually speaking up, or to show up to try to get help, or from running away from them, or they were trying to prevent me from ever letting anybody know what was going on. They ended up sending my sorry, I didn't write this down before I started talking, so it's just coming out all weird shit. I've never actually explained it. But they sent my minivan, into the water, and then they sent me and my little boy into the water in my dream. And there was no way for me to save him or myself. And it was really bad. And the water was this really terrible brown color. And it was so terrible, you guys. It was just the most terrible dream. And I felt like that God himself was speaking to me in that dream, and that he was like letting me know that if I didn't speak up to the cops, if I didn't speak up to these, marshals, or to whoever that, about what he needed, if I didn't speak up to them, that this is what was going to happen to my son and I. And so, dude, like, honestly, like, and that was like the second time that God had to tell me. Like, he had to tell me the first time, like, as I was fleeing the area, he was like, was that your daughter back there? When, somebody had just been slain, he was like, was that your daughter back there? And I was like, Lord, I was like, I don't know if that was my daughter. I didn't actually know if it was my daughter. I was like, I hope that would not have been my daughter. I don't think that it was. I would hope that wasn't her voice. I don't think that it was, but I guess I can't exactly tell you where she is at the moment. You know what I mean? Like, I knew where she was, but she was with her friends. She wasn't with me. So for all I knew, you know what I mean? I understood if, I grasped what, God, universe, spirit world was trying to convey to me, was that because she wasn't with me, that it could very well have been her up on that hill. And he said, it was somebody's daughter, wasn't it? It might not have been your daughter, but that was somebody's daughter up there. And, for all I know, that was one of God's favorite daughters up there. I have no idea whose daughter that was. I know that for the people responsible for it all, that it's a really big funny joke, that anybody would be traumatized by it because it's something that you guys do all the time. I'm way more sensitive than that, and people knew that, which is part of the reason why or maybe they didn't entirely know, but they knew that I was sensitive enough to be impacted by you guys doing some shit like that around me. But I began to think like maybe it wasn't everybody back there who was responsible for what happened to the chick. And that must have been why someone went out of their way to hang a distress flag in the yard. And it did look like a couple people were upset and worried about that distress flag in the yard. And they were like, I don't know when somebody changed their, I don't know when this happened. I got to get up there and climb up there and change that or whatever. To actually embark on the mission to leave from where I was and actually go to New York and actually go through the process of opening my mouth and trying to expose all of this information. I put myself and my kid, it's not that I put us at risk. It's that we had to go through a lot of danger and peril and run from a lot of dangerous people and outrun and outsmart and outlive. And you know what I mean? A lot of dangerous people along the way. And I knew that by taking the effort to speak up for, these dead people, and taking the effort to speak up about this distress flag, that I was going to create a buttload of enemies, and that I would not necessarily be creating even one ally in the process. And that afterwards I would probably just be, you know what I mean? Unless they pointed me in some direction or provided some kind of place or relief or something like that, guided me somewhere, or made things easy for me somewhere, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, unless something happened that I was just basically going to be wandering around potentially the entire United States running from these same people who had driven me to New York to complain in the first place. And that is exactly what would end up happening. That no one would actually intervene to prevent these people from following me and from pursuing me over speaking up about, their crimes against humanity and, God and the universe and the earth. And, but I did feel very patriotic. I did take it seriously. I felt at the time that I was kind of in a way giving my life to go make a report and to go let people know that there was a distress flag out in a field in the mountains of West Virginia. And you might not think that that's a big deal. You might not care, but there was a distress flag out there, and it was a really serious distress flag. And I'm not sure if it was, all part of, some funny CIA, NSA joke and stuff like that, but which, very well could be. But either way, the fact is that I saw a distress flag and I still carried the message of the distress flag with a 5-year-old while I had begun to suffer from amnesia after the most traumatic event of my entire life, while I was being pursued by stalkers and murderers and rapists and killers and child molesters. And I took the message of that flag over 400 miles away to a technically different nation. Even though it was all a funny game and a setup to everybody, I still considered myself a hero to me. Okay? It might not be a hero to you. I apparently didn't and wasn't able to save any lives, even though, from what I knew, there were still people back there who needed rescued and bodies that could have been removed and examined at the very moment that I was giving my statements. As I said, those people seemed like they were ready for me to show up so that they could treat me like I was stupid, and not take what I was saying seriously. And one of them even kind of made fun of me for being fat. But overall, I felt like that there was maybe some kind of spiritual something happening there, that maybe people were sort of getting what I was saying. They did actually seem to, at one or a couple points, seem to be taking what I was saying really seriously. I think that some of them even cried. The cop that I talked to was the trooper that I talked to. I've tried to look for that guy. I know that that sounds weird. I've tried to find even a picture of him on the internet so that I could figure out who that was. Because I was really traumatized at the time, and I feel that I was a really weird person to take an account from, and I'd never seen an officer actually do it right the way that he did it. And I could feel that, just as I had been told before I talked to him, that guy was not. Now, I didn't know it was going to be that guy. I just knew that one of the guys that I was going to be talking to was going to be like this dude who was not corrupt. It was supposed to be that I was talking to this one cop guy, or this one trooper guy, or this one agent who was pretending to be a trooper, or whatever was going on there, or it was supposed to be this marshal, or this chief dude, or whoever it was. One of these people, one of these dudes, was supposed to be like a super, super good guy, like one of the secret, like the spirit world secretly knew that there was secretly weird shit going on, and that one of those guys was some super, super X-Men good guy for the, cop for the good guys or whatever. But I kind of almost wondered if, because I could never find the dude on the internet, his face or whatever, if that dude was actually like secretly a federal agent who showed up pretending to be a state trooper and began to, you know what I mean, drill me for these questions. And he almost was drilling me, and he was really, really good at it. He was excellent at cross-examining me. And like, I still ended up being chased across the nation, and my pursuers weren't stopped then. I think that they were actually burying bodies on the side of the road there in New York that very week. While I was there, had followed me, and they were picking people off there and burying them body parts and stuff there, just the same way as they were doing in Buchanan and throughout West Virginia. And I wasn't sure actually that wasn't what happened to some of my neighbors, because after they disappeared, I walked right by this area on the highway where there are 3 body spots. I tried to pretend that I didn't see them. I only saw them that one time, and I was afraid to go back and look afterwards. But now I think that I could go back and look. I just haven't yet. And I'm not in Buchanan right now. If I was lingering around there long enough, I could have accomplished and gone back and looked at and checked out all different kinds of stuff. So anyways, that might not be necessarily enough, there might not really be information in there, so to speak, for anybody involved in any kind of like investigation per se. But I just kind of wanted to give an idea, a little bit, of like what it was like during that certain time frame. But it was mostly to talk about the flag, to talk about being a rebel and all that shit. If I'm a rebel to anything, it's a rebel to a corrupt system. It's a rebel to a broken, corrupt system that has just all been run into the ground. That has been run into the ground by pedophiles, skanks, sex offenders, corruption, things of that nature. And it obviously needs some help. You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing to be a rebel against the corruption that destroys a nation, but I'm not trying to be rebellious. I'm not trying to be a cranky bud. I'm not trying to be contrary. I'm not trying to bring calamity. I would be more so focused on like growth, harmony, knowledge, education. Growth is a huge thing for me that I wish for everyone else. I wish that people had a higher standard as far as how they treat each other, rather than having high standards as far as the kind of cars that they drive or the houses that they live in and things like that. Not that I wouldn't like to live in a nice car, a nice house, or even a nice car, shit, for that matter. I mean, I know also that my haters, just because I made this video, that they're going to be talking about how I'm a dissenter or whatever. And I'm kind of making this in response to a video that I at least just saw the title. I don't know if I started to watch it or not. I definitely didn't watch all of it either way. But and then I know that the government is kind of on the subject right now, because they're all like, we got to figure out who the dissenters are and stuff. And it's like, no, dude, you need to figure out who the sex offenders are, and you need to get them the fuck out of there and stop worrying. Like, for you guys to be like, who are the dissenters and stuff, you're literally only talking about the people who are worried about you being a sex offender right now, because that's the only subject that anybody's been on for a long time, dude. Like, we know what this is about. You know, if there's any information in there that can help anybody with anything, that's excellent. I don't know if it helps for me to tell you about how people were stealing money from my Cash App card, from my Wisely card, from my all these cards, that all they've done the entire time is steal from all of these fucking cards while while they had access to my phones. Another thing that they did was before I was subject to the grape in my own house and MDK of other people and all that other shit that they were pulling. um Crap, I can't even remember what I was going to say because I just really need to run to the potty, and I don't actually know how many seconds or how long this thing will allow me to pause. But I know with my other phone, not very long. It wasn't allowing me to pause for very long. So I think I'm just going to end it here because I've already gone on for a really long time. Um, as I said, like, I don't really want to give too many details about certain things. I'm also not afraid to admit what, do you know what I mean? That drastic change that I made in going and deciding to speak up for people. That was years ago. I stepped away from the entire situation and area for years, and just stepped away and tried to allow everybody to, fix, arrest, clean up, go after, dig up, you know what I mean? Whoever, everything that they needed to in the time frame that I was gone. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. There wasn't an arrest. Nobody dug up a body. Nobody went to go rescue kids or people out of tunnels. Nobody fucking did anything. So, like, I still, the people who are all responsible for all of that shit are the first ones to basically watch all of these videos and write everything that I say. And, they're the ones hovering over me 24, like, I've just dealt with them hovering over me 24/7, basically. But, I hope to at least shake hands someday with the state trooper who interrogated me, basically, whenever it came to the things that I ended up telling him, which I actually describe that. Whenever I describe that to people, I tell them that I mediumed statements. Like, some of the statement was from me, dude, but some of the statement, dude, I felt like was from the Holy Spirit, or from, like, the spirits he was talking about themselves, and that they were like, I know that sounds crazy, but, like, and I didn't even, like, everything came natural. I didn't even realize what I did. I didn't even realize what had happened for months, or like, I knew what had happened, but I didn't acknowledge it, like, on, like, I knew, but you know what it's like to know something but not to acknowledge it. And there are much more passionate and drastic and dramatic and emotional ways that I could be telling these stories, but I'm not trying to secondarily traumatize or manipulate the public or anyone else. So I'm trying to tell these stories in the most clear, clinical, you know what I mean, potentially even lighthearted way that I possibly can, because this and pretty much everything else that I have to say is really kind of darker, more negative information and stuff. And, hopefully there'll be some, nicer videos in between things, but I don't know. For now, it's just this. That's kind of a lot of things all into one. That was the occasion that actually taught me how to panhandle. Because they stole that money from my account, and there was no one for me to contact after everybody had done this to me. Oh yeah, I was saying, that's what I forgot because I needed to use the bathroom, was that they got into my phone, and they changed the numbers and names around. Like, they would get in the names on my contact, and they would mess up the phone numbers to where I wouldn't be able to contact those people. And they would also hijack my social media accounts, and they would contact everybody else and have them put me on ignore, and then they would get on my stuff, and from a distance they would delete messages that would come through to me from people who were actually people who were potentially any good at all. They would just delete their messages and delete my interaction. Like, uh, you know, they did a lot of things to prevent people from listening to me and prevent people from um, considering me credible or whatever. But this is all a really emotional time frame that I'm talking about. I could just go on and on and on about the reservation and reservations. I could go on and on and on about New York. Unfortunately, I was set up there. I was while I was with a victim in a trafficking situation. They set me up to be in a my van at with pot smell in it, because we sat in my van and smoked pot, or I sat in my van and smoked pot all day while I was at a memorial service. We didn't have any cigarettes, and I was at somebody else's dad's memorial service. Like, I was really trying to be as polite as I could, but eventually I did go out in my car and smoke some pot, which and then they set me up to be driving through town and for this cop to just pull me over for no fucking reason, basically. So that sucked really bad, because my car of course smelled like pot because I didn't have any cigarettes. I only had pot, and and then that became a big deal. And that's also a really aggravating thing, that they will give people DWIs or DUIs or whatever stupid shit just because their car smells like pot, or because they smoked pot that day and drove or whatever. That's absolutely fucking retarded. It's basically a way to discriminate against and commit hate crimes against people who smoke pot, especially in a time frame right thereafter that they, you know what I mean, that they legalized pot. And it almost seems like it upset certain authority figures, so they started to just chase people down in their cars and make sure that their cars didn't smell like, oh, you're not smoking pot and driving, are you? Oh my God, you're not smoking pot and driving, are you? Well, I've only smoked pot and drove since I was 13 years old, officer. Like, I'm not telling everybody else to smoke pot and drive or anything like that. People who are like, there's certain people who can smoke pot and drive, certain people who can drink and drive and are just fine. They actually learned how to drive. Have you ever seen the movie The Drunken Master? Like, you can actually develop skills while you're drunk and wasted and shit like that. I am not telling anybody to do anything like this. I'm just saying that I wasn't actually displaying any problems. I wasn't swerving. I wasn't driving stupid. I didn't commit any crimes. I didn't commit any crimes to actually get a DWI. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't commit any crimes to get pulled over, is what I'm saying. Like, it was super stupid. I was literally just, the store was right fucking there. We just needed cigarettes and then to go back to the fucking memorial service. But I was basically like her little slave, her person, her kept person, and it was her job to keep an eye on me and to tell me what I was doing, play by play, step by step, because she was the person who was keeping me. So I, I'm still a little bit upset about how that, and they even have it, they even had her name in the paperwork saying that she worked with them to get me in that situation and stuff like that. So it kind of was a setup, and they even admitted that it was a setup in the paperwork. And they set me up like that to try to take my kid. The whole setup wasn't just to get me in trouble, it was actually to try to take my kid. And they'd actually tried to set things up about how they were going to take my kid that night and stuff like that. So this whole fucking freaky ass family worked together months ahead of time to have a memorial service, and that was going to be the night that they set me up to get my kid, to take my kid away from me. They all hoped that they were going to set me up for this DUI or DWI or whatever it's called whenever they smell pot in the car or whatever. And that I was just going to go right to jail. I was just going to go to jail forever and ever. And that they were just going to be able to take my kid and do whatever they wanted with him and just be his new guardians. And they, yeah, so it didn't really work out like that. I definitely still got out of jail that night. I wasn't in jail. I got out of from where they were talking to me. They just took me there and talked to me for fucking hours. They just kept me there and talked to me for hours under surveillance. And I was like trying not to, and then I was like trying not to say the wrong thing. Like it was just really weird. I didn't fully understand the situation. I understood that they tried to say that I had a New York driver's license and that I had some special skill sets, whatever, some special New York driver's license that meant that I was able to move hazardous material or some fucking shit. I don't even know. But I was just like, okay, you know what I mean? I just went along with what they were saying because I fucking was honestly really fucking scared. Like, if you have to flee the state that you live in because the cops are corrupt and you can't go to the other state that you used to live in because the cops are corrupt there too, they all stood around and watched you like the cops in Texas actually all stood around and waited for me to die one time. Like I had to like not die and then the cops just had to leave. Like I've watched them watch me wait for me to die before. Okay? It's not a fucking joke. Yeah, so anyways, that's a lot of information. I will probably have way more to talk about than that, but I'm already a lot in, so I'm just going to end it there. Thank you for listening, and God bless.